My name is Hector Camacho. I'm the Director of Guidance and College Counseling here at St. Francis. This is a recording of our webinar from last week, which we also had technical difficulties with. Why don't we just go ahead and get started, since I know a lot of you have been waiting for a little bit here. We're talking about sophomore schedules here. And before we get into sophomore schedules, I do want to take a real quick detour to talk a little bit about college admission testing, because I know this may be on your mind, or you may be hearing questions or have comments or questions about SAT, ACT, particularly since your students received their PSAT scores in the fall. That was their first full-length standardized test that they may have taken. The PSAT in the sophomore year is actually a pre-test. So we do not administer what's called the PSAT 10. We administer the PSAT itself in both sophomore and junior year. But the sophomore year purpose is just to get students accustomed to this idea of a 3-hour test, get them accustomed to the questions that they're going to be, the kinds of questions they're going to be asked on a standardized test. These scores are not seen by any college. The only people that see the scores are the student themselves and the counselor. We don't really use that score for really much anything at this point. The junior one is the one that gives us a little bit more insight into how students are doing in terms of preparation for SAT particularly. But if you look at this testing calendar, you'll see that we're still in February of 2019. So an actual SAT or ACT doesn't actually take place until the spring of junior year. So we wanted to make sure that that information was out there. Your student will again take the PSAT in October as a junior. And as I said, that would be a better indicator of their preparedness for the official SAT. And we also offer a practice ACT in November, because students should be able to get a feel for which exam structure that they prefer. And that's the one that they should be going all in on for the studying, for the purposes of studying. The actual SAT and ACT should not be used as the baseline. And for those of you that were able to attend our presentation with Bruce Reed from Compass, they also advise that you use practice tests, whether they be the paper ones, online versions, whatever it might be. Use those before you actually take a full-length SAT or ACT. Those are not baseline exams. There is no benefit to a student taking them earlier rather than later. Most students will take their first SAT, ACT at the earliest March of junior year, but more so are taking it in May or June. And there is room in the fall of senior year to take additional tests if a student wants to retest. So again, there's no rush into the SAT, ACT for sophomore students particularly, but even in junior year, students do not need to be taking it in the fall of junior year. That's just a detour real quick before we get into the actual course scheduling pieces. Best resource for course scheduling, you'll notice, is on the Guidance and Counseling website. There's a drop-down bar that says course scheduling information. It has all the important scheduling dates about when students will actually register for their courses. It has a link to the course bulletin, which is highlighted here in this green arrow. The course bulletin is the end-all document about what prerequisites look like, what the scheduling process looks like, what the course change policy looks like. This is a really, really important document that students should be using as part of their decision-making process. There are qualifying exams and informational meetings that have been held. The academics office maintains those dates and publishes those dates. The counseling office also sends a reminder the day before to students, just so that they're staying on top of any dates that they might need to know of. This has also been presented in the classrooms by subject, so English teachers would have gone over qualifying information for English, as well as important dates to look forward and prerequisites. But we're still going to walk through a couple of the course sequences, just so you know what your students have been receiving. For next year, students will be enrolled in either British Literature, which is English 3, or AP English Language. You'll notice from the arrows that there is a lot of fluidity here. So a student that is enrolled in English 2H and maybe wants to take a step back from the honors level of English could enroll in British Literature. And then if they wanted to jump back into an honors level course, they could do so at the senior year. And likewise, someone who is in English 2 this year has an opportunity to take AP English Language if that is a challenge that they are looking for. The prerequisites for AP English Language are a the suggested prerequisites, I should say, are in a B or higher in English 2 honors, or an A in English 2. Now, these are suggested prerequisites because at the junior and senior level, humanities courses, AP level, are all informed enrollment. They are suggested prerequisites, and that's based on historical data on how students have performed based on the previous class they're coming from in the sophomore year. So if a student does not meet that prerequisite, he or she could still enroll in the course. The only caveat I would add, or additional information I would give as a counselor, having seen what this looks like from an overall perspective, those prerequisites are in place because we've seen that a student that's earning lower than an A or lower than a B in English 2 honors really struggles to eke out anything higher than a B- in that AP English language class. It is among the most challenging classes on campus as rated by students in terms of workload and level of critical thinking, which it could be a really positive thing. It's great to challenge yourself, but really just going into it with an understanding of this may be the first time a student hits a wall in terms of their writing development, a major one, because the level of rigor of this course is so high. And that is intentional because any advanced placement course is supposed to mirror the experience of a college level course. So there's flexibility in there. English teachers have again gone over the course options. There were informational meetings that many students attended to see if it was something that they were interested in taking. Counselors are meeting with their sophomore students now through mid-March. And we have those conversations one-on-one to kind of balance out that load as well. One other great resource that I encourage your students to use is to reach out to some of their junior level friends that maybe have taken the course or are currently enrolled in the course, just to get their input on whether or not that's something they may be interested in doing. Religious studies, students will be automatically placed in their next year in either moral issues or social justice the first semester, and then they will swap with the other class in the second semester. So there's no rhyme or reason why some students end up in one course the first semester and others in the other. That is just a scheduling program that drops them into the class. This will be the first time in their time at St. Francis that they'll actually have 2 religion teachers. So your moral issues teacher will likely be different from your social justice teacher. In some cases, that does change periods during the day as well. So say a student is enrolled in social justice, 3rd period, 1st semester, they may have moral issues 6th period in 2nd semester. It definitely doesn't move around any of your year-long courses, but that's more applicable to students who are perhaps enrolled in a semester elective. That may happen. And then in the senior years where a little bit of choice comes in, where students are required to take Christian vocations and one of the selective courses as a senior. For social studies, students are currently enrolled in World History or AP European History. This is, again, a level where students can make a choice of what they want to take. US History is the default, and most students will take US History. There is an option for AP US History. The suggested prerequisites for that course are a B or higher in AP European History, or an A in World History. And AP US History also looks at English grades, and the prerequisites are similar to those in English, in that for AP US History, the suggested prerequisite is a B in English 2 honors or an A in English 2. AP US History as an advanced placement course is, again, one of the more rigorous courses on campus, among the most rigorous courses on campus. It's a lot of content and definitely a lot of writing for the exam. The AP exam itself does cover a wide breadth of US history, but the writing component is definitely an area that the instructor focuses on over the course of the year. So students should consider the amount of work that's required in this course and think about the other courses they're taking before signing on right away. The other thing to note is that AP courses typically have summer reading, and sometimes that's really a good indicator or gauge for students as they're in their summer and they're thinking about the course load that's coming up. The summer reading can give them kind of an idea of if it's something that they want to pursue. One question that comes up sometimes is, can a student enroll in an AP US History course and then switch into college prep US history a little bit later on. The only time that that can really happen is in the summer. So once a student receives the book list in July, there is a form that is part of that book list where a student can request that change. Once school starts, it becomes a lot more difficult to remove oneself from AP US history or any AP level class, because by then we've set in place our staffing needs of where teachers will be, and there is typically room in the second and third days of school to again switch from AP level to college prep level. After that change window closes though on the third day of school, there's really no out for an AP level course, and that's part of the contract information. And all contracts are available at our website under that course scheduling information. In the senior year, students are required to take 1 semester of government, 1 semester of economics, and there are AP levels for both of those. Math gets a little bit more challenging because your students are in different places. What is shown here is the typical high school college prep track, which is that students generally take Algebra 1 in the freshman year, followed by geometry in the sophomore year, and Algebra 2 or some form of that in the junior year. But we also recognize that some students have entered at different levels. So while your student may be enrolled in geometry this year, others may be in Algebra 2 already, or perhaps trigonometry or pre-calculus, and in some very limited circumstances, calculus. The math pathways are actually discussed as a class in each math classroom, and then the math teacher has a very specific conversation with each student about their math placement for next year. So students cannot choose the course that they enroll in for mathematics next year. They are automatically placed by their teacher. But that's based on a conversation based on how they're performing in the class. There is technically an appeal process if a student wants to enroll in a course that the teacher has not suggested, and the math department chair approves any of those appeals. And that's usually based on how the student ends up in the class at the end of the year with the final grade. Math and world languages are what are called progressive subjects, meaning if you did not do so well the first semester, but earn an A the second semester, well, that suggests that you understand material from the first semester. So I think if there is an appeal filed for any math placements, the math department chair is certainly going to be looking really closely at how the student performed in the second semester. All of the prerequisite information for all of these courses is listed in the course bulletin if the student wanted to look at those. But again, this is a course where students don't even have the option to enter it into their course scheduling form. It is automatically determined by their math teacher in conversation with the student. By now, most math teachers have had that conversation with students. So if you have a question about that, you may want to check in with your student, ask, has your math teacher told you what class you want to take? I do like to give a little bit of advising on this one in terms of students currently enrolled in Advanced Algebra 2 Trig Honors right now. The standard pathway from Advanced Algebra 2 Trig is into pre-calculus. There is an option for students to enroll in calculus next year following this class. What we have found statistically is students that do make that leap and skip over pre-calculus just very generally struggle in that class. And I bring that up because as sophomores taking advanced algebra and jumping into calculus next year, they really have no pathway if they don't do well in calculus next year as a junior, because the next course that they would take would be Calculus BC. So really think about whether pre-calculus is the option for your student next year or AP Calculus for those students that are currently enrolled in Advanced Algebra 2 Trig Honors. Science is another one that may look a little bit complicated. Students can be enrolled currently in conceptual physics, chemistry, or chemistry H. That's generally where all sophomore students are. Some may be in biology. What I like to do when I'm talking about the science sequences is to lay out the traditional sequences, which are some students have taken earth science. So if you're in biology, one of the sequences from biology would be biology to chemistry to physics, or the other sequence would be biology to conceptual physics to chemistry. There's also the option of biology to chemistry to exercise science. We have a new course offering, environmental science. So it could be biology to chemistry to environmental, or biology to conceptual to environmental. There are many pathways here, but I think as a general trend, what students are looking at is either biology to some form of chemistry to some form of physics, or biology to some form of physics to chemistry. And then they can take an AP course if they wanted to in the senior year, because all APs except AP Environmental Science are only available to seniors. So that raises the question then, can my student as a junior take AP Environmental Science? That is an option, but I would caution students about that one, particularly students that are considering something in engineering, because if you look at how the sequences work, we can only really fit 4 years of science into the course scheduling or the course caseload. So if a student is very much interested in say the biological sciences, or even in environmental science themselves, a student could theoretically take biology to chemistry to AP Environmental Science to AP Biology, AP Chemistry. That would be the only way that a student could really fit in 2 AP Science courses in the course of their time at St. Francis. But notice from that sequence, it does omit physics, which is an important part of any student that is considering a field like engineering and any of the disciplines within engineering itself. So this is, again, a conversation that is best had one-on-one with the student and the between the student and the counselor about what pathways look like. But I think as a general note, you might want to consider that the traditional pathway is biology to chemistry to physics, or biology to some sort of physics to chemistry. That's where we're at for most students. For students that took earth science last year, they would follow that same trajectory. So it would have been earth science to bio to either chemistry or conceptual physics. So those pathways still are in existence. The only graduation requirement here is that a student take biology itself and a physical science. And all of our physics and chemistry classes meet that physical science requirement. The graduation requirement for sciences is 3 years. Most students will take a 4th year of science as well. There's an interesting additional option that you don't see here, and that is engineering. Engineering is a course that we're offering that was originally in our science department and is eligible for CSU UC science level credit, but we have actually moved that course into our new technology and design department. So a student could theoretically take 2 sciences either next year or as a senior if they enroll in engineering as an elective. And again, the UC and CSU system view engineering not as an elective, but as an actual science course, lab-based science course. So we can speak with students more about that if they have questions. World languages. This one's a little bit more straightforward. Students in their sophomore year are typically in level 2, maybe 3, and in some cases, rare cases 4. We definitely advocate for students to take a minimum of 3 years of language. The graduation requirement is 2 years, but what I do tell students when I'm meeting with them individually is there is a noticeable jump between levels 2 and 3 of any language. It's maybe akin to the jump that they would have seen starting a language in the first place, where you go from knowing nothing into really talking more specifically about a language. That 2 to 3 jump is notable. We do encourage students to take 3 and in many cases 4 years of language, but this is the point where this is almost a decision point for students of whether they want to continue with their language, because it is not required. For the CSU and UC system, it is recommended that they take a 3rd year of language. Some students opt to not take the foreign language or world language course in high school after the 2nd year, and instead they take a summer course, which is entirely acceptable. A student could take a summer course in the level 3 language if they still wanted to take level 3, but still have room in their schedule next year for perhaps an elective. That's an option. Any summer coursework in world languages will be displayed on the St. Francis transcript, but it's not calculated into the GPA. But then again, our general advisement is that the student take 3 years if they are capable of taking 3 years, because we also recognize that for some students, the language just isn't clicking, and we certainly wouldn't want a student to enroll in a course where they really weren't feeling that they could be successful in that class. So that's part of those individual conversations that we have with students about level 3 of a language as a junior. So I did want to take a minute to pause to see if there are any questions about those core content areas. I know the Q&A section is open if you want to type a question into there. And if there are no questions, I will continue. I'm not seeing any questions yet. So I will continue. Oh, here we go. Now we have some questions coming in. Question was about engineering. I'll get to that one a little bit later when I talk about electives. And then another question is, can one switch language in the 3rd year? One could, for sure. That is a possibility, but you should note that the UC and CSU system, which is that's our bar. That's what we use as how we set many of our graduation standards. The UC-CSU wants, if it's going to be a 3rd, 4th year of language, it should be in the same language. So the only students that I would recommend switching language in junior year would be those that are at level 3 or 4 as a sophomore right now. And they maybe have completed the sequence at St. Francis. So let's say a sophomore in French 4 is done with their language requirement, has exhausted the sequence that is offered. Actually, we do offer French 5H, but has exhausted pretty much the 4 years of language at St. Francis. They could then switch into, say, level 1 Chinese or level 1 Spanish. That is an option, but I definitely would recommend it if a student wants to take languages for the purposes of meeting the recommended 3-year requirement for UC, or 3 years for UC-CSU, that it be in the same language. Okay, I'm going to move on, but you can continue to type questions if you have them, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go on. It's at the sophomore year that you do want to have a conversation with your students, because part of their graduation requirement is that they take a full year of health and fitness, which was formerly known as PE. They took 1 semester as a freshman student, and they still have 2 more years, if they have not done so already, to take that 2nd semester of a health and fitness course. So we keep an eye on that to make sure that students are enrolled. Some students know that they're saving it for junior year, which they perceive as one of the most challenging years, so they like to have that physical activity built into their day in junior year. Some students know that they're pushing it off till senior year. It is completely okay to wait to do that PE requirement, that health and fitness requirement, but we do alert students to make sure that's on their radar. I do also like to point out to some students that if they have not met their full year visual performing arts requirement, they can do so through they can meet both the visual performing arts requirement and the health and fitness requirement in a 1-year dance 1 course. And some students have taken advantage of that, especially if they want to make sure that they have room for other electives in their senior year. So that is an option that allows you to what's called double dip. And that's dance 1. That's the only course that applies to that. There is a situation where some students are enrolled in band, and when you look at, when a student looks at their schedule, taking 4 years of band, which is a great thing to do, leaves very little room for that health and fitness semester, particularly if they're taking 4 years of a world language as well. So this is an exception that is made only for students that are enrolled in 4 years of band and 4 years of foreign language. We do have a waiver for that 2nd semester of the health and fitness requirement. So that's a conversation to have, again, with students only that are planning on taking 4 years of band and 4 years of a world language. But the purpose of this slide is just to keep on the radar that there is a 1-year visual performing arts requirement, and there is 1 more semester of health and fitness required before graduation for all students. I got a note about the volume issue, so I'm hoping that it's a little bit better now. Please do let me know if you're having still volume issues. So when we look at all of the coursework, students are pretty much enrolled in 6 core courses in junior year, and they do have an extra period, which is that since we offer 7 periods in the day, some students will elect right away to take study hall or an office assistant, and that is something that we don't necessarily discourage, particularly for students who have had a study hall or office assistant. Sometimes they need that time in the day to be able to keep up with their homework assignments, especially for students that are heavily involved in some sort of extracurricular activity. Some of our athletes, some that are really heavily involved in say speech and debate or maybe drama productions, they really value that time. And so a student can enroll in either a year or semester of study hall free or an office assistant. For juniors that are enrolled in a study hall, they are still required to be on campus, even if that study hall period is at the beginning or end of the day. The only exception is for first period. If a student is placed into a free first period, then they are allowed to arrive late on Brown days. But if you take a look at the course of electives that are the number of electives that are available to students, there are lots of options, and they can mix and match 2 semester courses or take a full year course. Any student that's interested in taking an advanced art course, as long as they've taken a 1-year introductory arts course, they can take any of the advanced art courses. We are offering 5 different kinds of health and fitness or PE classes next year if students have to finish out that requirement. This is a time when some students decide they want to take their first computer programming class to see if there's any interest in that. So that's available as a 1-year course. You'll notice that there's also AP Psychology. That is a 1-year AP level course. I would alert you that that is, again, amongst one of the more challenging courses on campus. And so I think it's important for students to have a conversation with the instructor, who's Ms. Boziger, to see if that's a good match for them. And I'm noticing that engineering is not listed here, but it is a year-long course. So engineering is an introductory course that's based on the program at the University of Texas called Engineer Your World. It can be taken concurrently with another science class because it is part of our technology and design department. It is eligible for D area lab credit by the UC CSU systems. So it is one of those courses that actually fulfills, from a college perspective, both a science requirement and an elective requirement, however the student chooses to take that course. It's in its first year, and the response has been really, really positive. So a student that may be exploring or considering, or maybe is just interested in the idea of possible engineering, might take that course as their year-long semester, the year-long elective course. We are also offering a few new electives next year, including ethnic studies, intro to bioprinting, and designing systems for gender equity. Those are 2 new courses or a couple of new courses that we'll be running for the first time next year. You'll notice that the designing systems for gender equity course is in the 0 period section, as is leadership. 0 period courses are courses that don't have traditional schedules. So in the case of leadership, I know that that course runs, it meets for 1 semester for, I think, every week, once a week at 7:15. And the schedule of that course is determined by the students that are actually enrolled in the course. And it is for 2 credits that do go towards the student's GPA. The Designing Systems for Gender Equity course, it's listed as 0 period. That one's a little bit more flexible. That one's a year-long course that actually meets 10 times throughout the year, and then has several supplemental activities for students to do from a distance. So it includes optional field trips. It includes optional meetings with industry professionals in the area of diversity and inclusion, and how to work against gender inequities in the workplace and in other places. So that one has a capstone project. It's a new class we're really excited about. But otherwise, students really have lots of options. We don't really discourage students from taking art if that's something that's a valuable part of their day. So if a student is enrolled in several classes and they really need that art in their day because it's kind of the break from their day, similar to what I said about PE courses, we encourage them to continue in their art courses. It is a great way to decompress. Many of the art classes are self-contained within the day. I mean, classes like band and choir aside, these visual arts really can be done within that period, and it is a good break or pause in the day. Otherwise, we have traditional academic-based electives like the history of the Olympics, intro to psychology, biomedical ethics, so students can mix and match those as they see fit. What happens next is your student has filled out an initial scheduling form, which is very, very preliminary. And we did that in the classrooms last week, beginning of last week. And from there, what will happen is this document has been printed or has been sent to the student, and hopefully by now you have seen it because every 10th grade student has done this. And we have a box right there on the bottom for if you have questions, and then we actually ask for a parent initial on that, just for any parent feedback ahead of our one-on-one conversations with students. So again, this sheet your student should have already because we did that in sophomore classrooms beginning of last week. Ask your student for this form, add any questions you have to it, and initial it, and then we use these to start calling in sophomores. And as I stated earlier, we will be meeting with sophomores now through mid-March. So those meetings started last week. They'll continue over the next couple of weeks, one-on-one conversations with the counselor. I just wanted to highlight the course scheduling information down here as well, which I had on an earlier slide. That course bulletin really is where all of this information comes from. So if you have more questions, that is a great resource for you to use. I have another question. It says, when signing in for sophomore courses, did not know that Dance 1 would qualify for both fitness and VPA together. Was this something new? No, this is in the course catalog that it is a double dipper course. This is one of the only double dipper courses on campus. So if you take a look in the course catalog, the course bulletin, you'll see that it says that it does meet the PE and VPA requirement. So students do not need to take a PE if they've taken Dance 1. That only applies to students that take it in sophomore year or later though. So if your student took Dance 1 as a freshman, that won't meet the PE requirement. That's the only stipulation there. And all of that information is laid out in the course bulletin. Question is, how do I download it as a PDF? I believe the link on the website is to a PDF version of it. So go to the counseling website, click on that 2019 course bulletin link, and that should take you to a PDF of the course bulletin. If that's not working for you, maybe send us a message, but I'm pretty sure that this was uploaded as a PDF for you. Again, let us know if that doesn't work out for you. So I did want to leave some more time for questions. If there are any questions that I can help with about schedules, if you have an individual question about, well, you can ask it here also, but if you do have a specific question, I always encourage parents to send their student with that question. I think that is a great way to create agency within the student to help them learn how to become an advocate for themselves and then hold them accountable for the answer to that question. You're also welcome to email your student's counselor to get a question answered. Make sure your student is involved in the conversation though. That's a really important part of it. So maybe it's a CC of the student just to keep them accountable for their education. There's a question about, does graphic arts for iPad qualify as VPA? Yes, we offer traditional graphic arts, which is Photoshop based, and then we offer graphic arts for the iPad, which is purely iPad based, and both qualify for not only the visual performing arts requirement for St. Francis, but they also are both UC approved fine art area classes. ASL, there's a question about ASL. If a student takes ASL If a student takes ASL, well, I would start with ASL is a limited enrollment course, which means it is limited to students who have either a language-based learning disability, or if there is some other reason why the student is placed in the course, so students would know about that ahead of time. And usually that's either identified as when before the student enters the school, so they took ASL 1 as a freshman, or they were placed into ASL 1 as a sophomore. So there's not really an entry point into ASL in the junior year. And as far as requirements are concerned, it is generally based on a language-based learning disability. We do offer 3 years of ASL. Will parents get to meet the counselor for their student one-on-one? We actually try to avoid those one-on-ones because it really changes the dynamic of the conversation that we're having with students. What we prefer to do is we can call in because that's a little bit something that students feel is a lot more accessible. Or if you have questions, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your student's counselor directly. That works as well. There is a question of whether students can concurrently enroll in a health and fitness course and another course. You cannot concurrently enroll in a health and fitness course and any other course. So that is one period that is carved out of the day. So there's no concurrent enrollment. There is an exception made for students that are enrolled in AP Biology and AP Chemistry, which come with a separate lab period. So on a student's senior schedule, they will see 2 periods for those 2 courses. The only exception made to concurrent enrollment is students that are either in the band program. So a student could be in band and both periods of AP Bio, or AP Chem, or a student that is enrolled in AP Computer Science A. That is another exception made to the concurrent enrollment rule. Otherwise, all PE courses, health and fitness courses, have to be taken as standalone periods. I believe that's all the questions I'm seeing. Okay. Okay, so the presentation is being recorded and it will be presented on the website. It should be in the presentation section with all of our other presentations. There was a request for more clarification on AP Biology and AP Chemistry. AP Biology and AP Chemistry are 2-period classes, so that students can take as a senior. Since the graduation requirements have students taking a full year of religion, a full year of English, most students are a full year of social studies, most students are taking a full year of science and a full year of world language and a full year of math, it can cause limits for the available elective options. So what we're saying is for seniors only, because only seniors can take AP Biology or AP Chemistry, an exception to concurrent enrollment is that a student can take, say, band, a 4th year of band, at the same time that they're taking AP Biology lab. That is for seniors only. Can a junior take any AP Science course? The only available AP Science course for juniors is AP Environmental Science, but we caution students about taking that because if a student takes AP Environmental Science as a junior, there really are limited pathways on what they could take as a senior. So I'm going to go back to the science slide. Because what would happen is for a student to take AP Environmental Science, they had to have taken biology and chemistry. So let's say that a student takes biology as a freshman, chemistry as a sophomore, AP Environmental Science as a junior. Their only options really are physics, general physics, not AP Physics, or AP Bio or AP Chem. And the important point that I wanted to make there was if a student is considering entering a STEM field, particularly engineering, it's much more advisable for them to take physics as a junior and then take an AP level science as a senior. So that would be the only caution I would give. So the direct answer to the question is, can juniors take an AP science course? Yes, but I think that is a one-on-one conversation about what that pathway looks like after junior year. There's a question about self-studying for APs. That is not advisable for science-based courses because of the lab component. Most students that are taking this AP Science should have some form of doing an AP, should have some form of being able to do the lab component. So that's not advisable. I'm gonna end the webinar, but I'll stay on the line. So thank you all for joining me. But as I said, I'll stay on the line just as questions go on for another 10 minutes or so. So thank you for joining us this morning. There's a question about summer geometry. I want to make sure I understand the summer geometry question correctly. Okay, I think I understand the question correctly. It's about taking another summer math course. The only summer math course that is, there are only 2 summer math courses that students at St. Francis are allowed to take for advancement purposes. That would be between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, a student is allowed to take a summer geometry course. And then we offer what's called a trigonometry jumper course, which is for students currently enrolled in Algebra 2 and earning an A. They can take trigonometry to become eligible for pre-calculus honors. Those are the only 2 math courses during the summer that are allowed for advancement. So if a student were to take a course, so let's say that a student is in Algebra 2 this year, they take pre-calculus this summer so that they can enroll in calculus next year. That's not allowable. By department standards, all math courses should be taken at St. Francis during the course of the regular year, with the exception of that summer geometry and summer trigonometry course. If the question is about whether a student can take trigonometry somewhere else, that's something that would have to be approved by the director of academics. We do recognize that sometimes family plans do conflict with our summer schedule, but what I would do is I would reach out to that student's counselor directly, because the director of academics does have to approve any of that coursework that's taken off campus if it's for the summer trigonometry course. Otherwise, if it's another math course taken in the summer, St. Francis would view that as enrichment, not advancement. So it could go on the transcript, but it would not calculate as part of the GPA. And I would caution families about taking them for enrichment, because from a college admissions perspective, if I see on a transcript that a student took a summer calculus enrichment course and then took calculus, I'd wonder why they took the same course twice. Was it because they needed to take it twice to be able to be successful? That's not necessarily a red flag, but it's definitely a pause moment, and I'd want a little bit more explanation on that. And I try to tell students that they want to avoid as many pause moments as possible in their application, unless it's for something very positive. Do most freshmen take biology, chemistry? The question is, do most freshmen take biology, then chemistry, then physics? Is that the typical sequence? That was historically what happened in the past, but since the introduction of conceptual physics 2 years ago, that is no longer the traditional path. Now we have students taking generally biology to conceptual physics to chemistry, or biology to chemistry to physics. So both pathways are, it's pretty evened out on what those pathways look like. The presentation will be located on the counseling website. So if you go to sfhs.com/counseling, there is a section on our site. Let me see if it's on the previous screen. It says there's a presentations section. You can't see it, it's on the right-hand side of the screen. But if you go to that website, log in with your parent information, you'll see a link for presentations. And there's also a parent section there for any additional resources you'd like. Yeah, there's a question, can conceptual physics be taken before chemistry? Yes, absolutely. So a student that goes from biology to conceptual physics can then take chemistry. And then there's a question of, can a student take AP Computer Science A and PE concurrently? No, there are no options for concurrent enrollment of a PE course. So health and fitness must be taken on their own. Okay. Well, thank you again for those of you that hung in there for the end. If you have any questions, again, encourage your student to bring that question and then hold him or her accountable for that. And also, you're always welcome to email your counselor, but I would definitely CC the student in that email just so that it keeps them honest, should I say. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.